Oh, I put the wrong side on. Good afternoon again. Welcome. I have to go through this long script because we're still being filmed. Welcome to the Council's Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Anne Thompson and I am Chair of the Committee. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube, except where there are confidential or exempt items. May I take this opportunity to remind you of some of the domestic arrangements. It is important that all participants conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. Please put your mobile phone on silent. To speak, you must use a microphone or you may not be heard on the live stream. Please do not interrupt the speakers. In line with current COVID guidelines, everyone is reminded to adhere to social distancing and to wear a face mask when moving around the room, unless medically exempt. Face masks may be removed when you are seated if you wish. To vote on matters, I will confirm the recommendation and request a mover and a seconder. The Democratic Services Officer will confirm if the application has been granted following a show of hands. Roll calls will not be undertaken now we are back in the same room, unless, of course, a name vote is moved and seconded. Right, that's the formalities. We have got speakers today, so for the benefit of the members of the public who have requested to speak, you will have received a copy of the General Public Participation Protocol. Oh my God, that sounds posh, doesn't it? And the Public Participation Guidance Notes, which explain the process for addressing the committee. May I remind you that with regards to addressing the committee, you will have 5 minutes to make your representation. Please give your name and address, then try to say everything you want to in that 5 minutes, as this will be your only opportunity to speak. The members of the committee will then ask you any questions that they have. Please just answer the questions and do not raise additional points. Right, that's it. We can get on with the meeting now after all that. In the old days, it only used to take about 2 minutes to start the meeting. Apologies for absence, substitute of members, please. I've got apologies for Anita.
Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Mooney, Councillor Burley, Councillor McLeave is subbing, and Councillor Hall, Councillor Edwards is subbing.
Okay, thank you. Urgent items, we haven't received any. Delegations, we haven't received any delegated matter to be moved out. Non-delegated. Admission of public and press, everything's in part 2. Any declarations of interest? Steve? Councillor Knott? Okay. It's just an ordinary interest, is it? Yeah. Well, sorry? Oh, former family, right, okay. Right, okay. Same for you, Derek.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor McLeavy.
Thank you, Chair. I declare an interest on the Bigger Village application. I know Willie Fox.
Right, okay.
So I would declare an interest in that one.
Okay, doc. Right, do you agree I confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of June?
Agreed.
So, do you agree the delegated approvals in the information booklet? Right, so we go on. I'll do the deferred item first, which is the New Inn Bigger Village, which is in the deferred booklet, because they're the people who are speaking. So you want to go to your deferred booklet, which takes forever to get through it all. We get there eventually. Is it not page booked anymore? No, I've got it. New Inn Bigger Village. Right, we've got the applicants to speak. So, are you both speaking, Mr. and Mrs. Fox? Just you, right. Can you come forward to this seat and put your microphone on? And I've just told you you've got 5 minutes. Thanks, love.
Okay.
My name is Will Fox. Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chairperson of the Committee, for allowing me to read out this short statement on this planning application. My wife's family have owned the New Inn since the 1980s, and we've purchased it, my wife and 2 children, in 1998, so been there a few years. We have witnessed the village expand over the years with the addition of new houses and various conversions, bringing new and young families to the village. These changes have always been positive and keeps the village alive, energetic, safe, and a friendly place to raise a family. Daily life in our village is not the same as in most areas. It is a strong, neighbourly and caring spirit. This is demonstrated by the village WhatsApp group chat, providing constant communication with requests for a favour is never gone unheard. These favours range from a shopping request to the offer of old furniture for upcycling. Public transport has never been an issue, as someone is always coming to and from the village, and often a free lift is provided. But in this day and age, it is unusual not to own a car. Our amenities are not as readily available as some areas, but there is a thriving pub, coastal walks, riding school, and multiple unspoiled areas to be enjoyed. This means more to us than a convenient shop, fast food outlets, heavy traffic with inconvenient parking. The safety and quality of life is very important to me, and I think our plans demonstrate this with off-road parking, generous gardens, and a sympathetic conservation keeping with the new development in line with current advice and guidance. I'd like to offer this safe, happy and mixed generational life to others by providing 2 new affordable properties through our barn conversion. Over the last 18 months or so, open space and rural living has never been more desirable to support people's health and well-being. This barn conversion will offer that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Kate Bellwood. I'm a planning consultant representing the applicant. Biggar is a village community, as you've just heard, and I don't think it sits comfortably in the definition of open countryside. The proposed development is located totally within an existing building in the centre of the village. Parking spaces have been created, but these are to be surfaced in sympathetic chippings with gardens divided by hedges. Therefore, the proposal has no visual effect on the wider open countryside, and the village boundaries do not get any bigger. It's not isolated, or no more so than any other residential areas of Walney. The officer's report talks of the remoteness of Biggar, with its key point being the distance to the nearest shops, which is Tesco at 1.8 miles. However, on a timed run, observing the speed limit, it took 2.5 minutes to reach Tesco from the applicant's house. As a comparison, the applicant then went to Griesbeck Avenue, Northscale, and timed the journey to the convenient grocer shop on Mill Lane, and it took just under 5 minutes. The point is that the residents of over 100 houses at Northscale are further from their services than Biggar residents, and they spend twice as much time in their car making a shopping trip. So in terms of connectivity, Biggar is possibly better, and certainly no worse off, than many other houses on the island. The report stresses importance on walking and cycling to shops and services, but I suspect most people on the island, or anywhere, if they're over 5 minutes away, use their cars. So again, in this respect, the people living in Biggar are in a position no different to anyone else living on the island or anywhere else. You can walk to the shops, you can get your shopping delivered, and there is a local bus route that, if there's enough houses in Biggar, could be extended to include the village. The Environment Agency do not object and agree the site and the buildings are in flood zone 1, so there is no danger to the potential occupants of this new housing development. The road may be inaccessible for a few hours in peak flood events leading to the village, but the house is safe, and once the water recedes, people can go about their business again. Notwithstanding the heritage consultees, all other consultees had no objections. With regard to the listed building and heritage issues, in 2000 the planning permission was granted by the council for even more extensive but similar design alterations to the first half of the barn. So the applicant is somewhat confused, for a proposal to convert the remainder of this barn in the same way is now considered unacceptable. That said, they accept the need for design changes and to consider the extent of the accommodation, and they will work with your planners to get the design right if you agree that the principle is in fact acceptable. In summary, members, yes, the development site, on paper, sits outside of a development cordon, but it is my opinion it is a sustainable development with other benefits which would outweigh this. National planning policy supports the conversion of buildings to houses, even in the open countryside. It supports the borough's housing need, and in particular the need for smaller affordable homes for young people. Remember, your housing figures are a target and not a cap. The reuse of the existing building means low visual impact and stops the building falling into disrepair through lack of use. There's no flood risk to the houses. It will support the pub and the community. There's short-term economic gain from construction. And it creates local homes for village residents to stay in the village and on Walney, and there's already been local interest in these houses. The only reason Biggar is not within a cordon is that the roads to it can flood, although this has been very rare, I understand, since the applicant has lived there. Is this really a reason to stop houses being built in what is clearly a village? Through the conversion of an existing building in a village, new houses would be created without harm to the landscape and without harm to the open countryside. We respectfully ask you to support this application for these reasons. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Right, Charles, do you want to take us through this one, my dear?
Thank you, Chair. I think most people will be surprised to find out that Biggar Village had 2 pubs, and the New Inn ceased trading in 1973. Started as a public house in 1869, but the building is considerably older than that. It is at least mid-18th century and was built originally as a farmhouse. As was typical of that era, the farmhouse was built with an attached barn, which would have been for livestock. And it is that attached barn which is the subject of this application, to convert the barn into 2 dwellings. Now, the farmhouse is a listed building, and the attached barn is part of the listing. And that's why there are 2 applications before you, one for planning permission, the other for listed building consent. Now, the attached barn has been extensively altered or remodelled, I think it's fair to say, during the 20th century, but it still retains a barn-like character. And when the building was listed, the barn had already been remodelled, so that was taken into consideration by the heritage inspector when assessing its suitability for listing. Both applications are recommended for refusal, and the reasons fall into 2 categories. One is planning related and the other is heritage related. And just starting with the planning side first, Biggar Village has for a considerable period of time had a residential development cordon. And what that meant was that, as was referenced in the presentation, there was a policy and principle for conversions and new build. And over those decades, there was a number of changes, a number of new dwellings. But that development cordon was removed, and it was removed in 2019 as part of the adoption of the local plan, the new local plan. And the reasons behind that was that there was concern, twofold. There was concern about, even though Biggar Village on the whole was outside the flood risk, the village was surrounded by an extensive area of land which the Environment Agency had identified as being at high risk of flood. And in addition to that, it was seen as a relatively remote community with few services. So the decision was taken as part of the local plan to remove the cordon. And what that has done is that it's weakened the principle in favour of development such as this. The other category I mentioned was heritage. And what the Act says, I'll read the section from the Act. It says, the decision taker must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, or of any features of special architectural or historic interest which it may possess. And special regard, what that means is that it's something we have to give particular weight to, protecting its special interest. And we have, as part of dealing with a listed building application, we have to consult with specialist organisations, and one that has responded have objected, and I'll just read you the objection. It says, we are concerned that the number and nature of the proposed fenestration, as well as the proposed porches to the outbuilding, create an overly domestic appearance, resulting in a structure that no longer appears subservient to the main building. So really what they're saying is that as a result of the conversion, it would lose its character as an agricultural, as a barn. And of course, its barn-like character is part of its importance, part of its listing, the fact that it remains ancillary. I think you could say that, it is an architect design scheme, and I think the architect has done, to be fair, a reasonable design, but he's faced with the challenge of a scheme where you have a lot of new rooms created. You know, it's 2 dwellings, a lot of rooms, all those rooms need windows. And really by the time that one's finished, you end up with a building which has a very different character to what it has and for why it's listed. So based upon those 2 factors, the heritage and the change in the cordon, the applications are recommended for refusal.
Members of the committee, anybody? Bill?
Thanks, Charles, for your explanation there on both accounts, and thank you to the speakers for coming in. I'm just looking at page 13. Is there any room for wiggle here, Charles? I'm looking at page 13 on the agenda, or page 119, whatever way you want to look at it. There's 2 numbers. And when you go to the bottom paragraph, it says, this is from the Joint Committee of the National Amenity Societies. When you go to the bottom paragraph, it says, subject to detailed design, it may be more appropriate to consider repurposing this space as 1 dwelling rather than 2, which could make better use of the existing apertures and preserve the overall character of the building and its appearance written within the conservation area. Is there any room for wiggle on that? Or is that a no-go?
Yeah, Chair, I think the difficulty is that we have a planning application and a listed building application before us. They are for full approval, so we have all the drawings, we have all the details. And the applications are clearly for 2 dwellings. So committee can't approve something that isn't proposed at the moment would be the short answer. So the application is either approved or it's refused. What you're asking was if there was, I made the point about how the architect had to deal with all these rooms which all needed windows. And obviously if it was a single dwelling, it would have been easier for him, to be fair. But you also have the planning issue as well, and the change that the local plan has brought. And the local plan no longer provides a cordon for Biggar Village. And what I would say, well, there was this decision as part of the local plan to remove, to change its status, is what I'm saying. And if you didn't want that, then perhaps the local plan shouldn't be saying what it's saying. Yeah.
I've come as a newbie to this, and I can't believe that this is going to be turned down. We've already been told there's no visual effect. Parking isn't an issue. It was a pub, therefore there was more cars in those days, and I'm one of the few people that did go to the pub actually over there. There's no objections from the community. The community is a very close-knit, vocal community. And if they had any objections, they would have objected. So there's no objections. We've already heard about the connectivity is better than North Scale. I feel that the principle of development is acceptable. It's not an unusual development in Biggar. There's been quite a number of really nice barn conversions, and they've fitted in with the village quite well. What's going to happen if this doesn't get converted? Are we just going to let it fall down? Which could happen. If we're not happy with the appearance or the numbers or whatever, then perhaps we could advise the applicants to speak to the planning department. Surely heritage is about preserving the building. We're not going to preserve the building if we refuse this. It is quite acceptable, and I think they would win on appeal.
Anybody else? Well, I'm afraid, Hazel, I have to totally disagree with you. You know, I think this is reckless, and the applicants could quite willingly come back with plans that would suit this building. We've got to preserve our heritage, and we've got to preserve barns, and we haven't got to go against our local plan that we've only just adopted. So I'm going to move the recommendation for both refusals, and is anybody going to second that for me, please? Okay, so now I will go to the vote, please. Paula?
It's not a roll call, Chair, it's just a show of hands.
Right, okay. All those in favour of the refusal for both recommendations, please show.
That's 7 in favour.
Those against?
2 against.
That's refused. But please, by all means, put other plans in. I'll come in and talk to the department to get something that you will be able to do in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Dalton members, I think, will be particularly familiar with the site. Well-known greengrocers, Brocklebanks, closed a few years ago, located on Market Street. And there are certain themes here as applied to the new inn, in the sense that there's heritage and flood risk. But the conclusions reached are different. It is recommended for approval. Market Street is, may come as a surprise, but it is in a high flood risk zone. And the reason for that is that Market Street occupies a valley floor. May not be particularly obvious, but it does. And to the south of Market Street, in the Beckside Road area, there are there's Pokerbeck and the Yarl which join. And where you have a confluence of two rivers or two large streams in this case, then there is the risk of flood. In terms of the flood risk issues, the decision maker is required to apply two tests before considering to grant planning permission. And one of these tests is that the development can be designed to be safe. And the Environment Agency agree now that with the floor area set at 1.2 metres above the ground, that the development itself would be safe. The second test is that the public interest or the public benefit of a scheme must be seen as overriding the remaining flood risk. So in other words, if there's a scheme which has no public benefit or little public benefit, then the flood risk would automatically dictate a refusal. And I'll come back to that point in a minute. In terms of the heritage, the building itself is not actually listed, but it is located within a conservation area. And what that means is that when one assesses the level of harm, one is not assessing the harm to the building itself from it being demolished, because of course the application is for its demolition and replacement. But one is looking at what the harm to the conservation area as a whole would be. And the conclusion reached and explained in the report that the loss of the building would result in harm to the conservation area, but less than substantial harm. That's the level of harm which has been found. That finding that the harm is less than substantial means that the public benefits of the scheme have to be weighed against the harm. And with reference to the benefits, I want to read a short extract from the structural report that has been submitted. There's a much longer section in the report itself, but I'll just read this sentence. And it says, in conclusion, it is our professional opinion that based on our single visit and what we are able to inspect, that the building has fallen into disrepair and gone past the point of saving. We recommend that it is demolished. Large areas of the building could not be inspected as it had already been condemned as considered unsafe not safe enough to inspect. And having inspected the remainder of the property, we cannot guarantee that further catastrophic structural failure will not occur. We have a special duty to preserve and enhance the conservation area. And admittedly, the loss of the building will result in some harm, but we have to balance that against the benefits. And we have a building here which is structurally defective, and there will be a benefit, a public benefit to that risk being resolved through redevelopment. And we have a scheme of 4 houses which is quite sympathetic, is reasonably sympathetic to the character of the conservation area. So weighing the two, the loss of the building versus its condition and the fact that we have a scheme of redevelopment, the conclusion is that the balance favours demolition and redevelopment. And if you were to agree that that is the case with the heritage issues, then the same would apply to the flood risk, that the benefits of dealing with the defective building would outweigh the risk now that the design has addressed the safety issue in terms of the flood risk. So based on that, the application is for approval.
Thanks, Charles. Anybody got any questions for Charles? Yep. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute, let me turn the man off.
Already over development within the area of the proposed application. My concern is obviously over the 4 houses that are going to be there, when there are other designated areas within the borough plan within Dalton, the housing. And is that over excessive within that area that's already developed island? Access to and from sites is going to be via 2 very busy junctions, Nelson Street in particular. There's got ongoing highway issues, both with traffic and limited visibility coming out of the sites. Parking is a major problem within the area. I know that it's been highlighted in the plans that the properties require at least 2 spaces for cars, but one of these spaces is highlighted as being a garage. And as we probably know, houses these days, or households, have multiple vehicles. And although it's saying garages are going to be very large, or over sort of size compared to what they would be, there's still the issue of, as most members probably realise, that most people don't use garages to park vehicles. They tend to be extra storage space these days, and that's still only, if that's the case, it'll only be 1 space per vehicle at the properties. And there's no other additional parking or very limited additional parking within Nelson Street area in general. So that's a major concern for myself.
Chair, if I may respond, the point that is raised about whether the site should be developed or not, I would say there's a very strong argument that the site should be redeveloped, and that is based on the conservation area argument that Market Street is characterised by an enclosed, built-up frontage. It's a typical high street where you've got the buildings built up to the pavement on both sides. And if we go back donkey's years, I remember when I was involved with the co-op development in Market Street, and there was an initial proposal to build a supermarket where the car park is, and to have the car park when the supermarket was built. And we opposed that because the character of Market Street is one of an enclosed street. You don't want the buildings set back. So one tries to keep this quite tight urban feel. One wouldn't want gaps. One wouldn't want a suburban character of housing either. I don't think one would want a couple of detached houses, for example, or a pair of semis. You know, from a conservation area perspective, you really do need a terraced form of development. In terms of the traffic generation, it's a material planning consideration to take account of the traffic that could reasonably be generated by the existing lawful use. I appreciate it's closed at the moment, but it could potentially reopen. But as a matter of planning law, it is a planning consideration what it could generate. And I remember years ago having complaints about lorries in the early hours serving Brocklebanks. It seemed to operate as a distribution centre as well as a greengrocers. It had like quite a large warehouse at the back. So in terms of its retail, and as I say, it did operate through distribution. I think comparing the traffic from 4 houses with that, I think it would be hard to argue that it's a material increase in traffic. Although I would fully accept that the road network is not great, the visibility is not great, but that is part of the character of the area, and I don't see how that can be resolved. And the final point, sorry, I knew there was a third point, was about parking. And under the local plan, we will accept garages as part of the parking provision. But to address the point the concern that you raised, the minimum size has to be 6 metres in length internal and a minimum of 2.6 metres in width. And if it measures those internal dimensions, which it does, in fact, I think the garage is a little bit wider than that, then we will accept that as part of the parking provision. So they have 1 garage and a space in front of it. I'm sure if the garage was an issue, it would be replaced with a parking space. But I think from a design perspective, it works a lot better the way that it's presented. So I hope that, Chair, answers the points raised.
When you look at the picture at the front of it, it looks such a pretty little shop, you won't think it was such a mess at the back. Okay, Councillor Knopp.
I share a lot of similar concerns to Councillor Edwards, to be honest with you. I'm not overly sure on sort of the development and so on, but I do think that the fact that we kind of got what shoehorning for dwellings into that space would be a lot of concern. I understand what you're saying, Charles, regarding garages and space in front. However, a lot of people don't use the garages now for parking. It's a nightmare around there to put mildly around the end of Nelson Street onto Market Street for access and egress as it is. Parking around there, I just think that having 4 dwellings there, you can potentially have people parking outside where the dwellings are, will impact on other parking spaces. And as a council in Dalton, it's one of the hottest topics is parking in the town. There isn't enough parking as it is. So what I would kind of propose, I think that as a committee it would be beneficial for us to go and actually do a site visit. Because I think then we could all have a look. That would be my recommendation. That's what it's a good recommendation. If we actually have a site visit as a committee, we can all have a look at the issues and then we're better formed to make a decision. Because I think it's a very much a hot topic, this one. And I do have a number of serious concerns about the applications in standards and form. So I think that we should all kind of go and have a look. Obviously with yourself and Charles.
Well, I'll second that, because I think I was just about to say the same thing, that we need a site visit to have a look at it. So does the committee agree we have a site visit next time? Yeah. It's quite radical at this time, isn't it? For our first site visit for 15 months, 16 months. No, I think we should do that. Okay, Charles, that's deferred for a site visit. Right, we'll go on to the next one. No, we're going to just have a look at the building in the planning application that's before us. You know, we can't change the planning application, but we're just going to go and have a look at the circumstances around and about. Okay. Probably not. Right, so we go on to the next one, which is... Oh, I'm way behind. I don't know where the hell I am now. Right, so we go on to Isleth Road. This seems like a rather large building, Charles.
Oh, thank you, Chair. This site was occupied by a detached bungalow. Planning permission has already been granted for a replacement dwelling, 1.5 stories high. What that means is that it's basically a dormer bungalow that's been approved. And the application before you is still for a dormer bungalow type development, but it's been redesigned. There are actually less objections to this one than the scheme that was approved last year. The one that was approved had an objection from the immediate neighbour, the attached neighbour, as it were. And this scheme is actually slightly better than the approved scheme. The reason why it's reported to you is that there remains an objection from a neighbour who lives on the opposite side of Isleth Road. And they are concerned about the impact on privacy. Of course, this is a taller property than what was there before. So there's the potential for additional overlooking. But the distance between the properties is quite great because, of course, Isleth Road is quite a wide road. And
Massive plots of land, aren't they, Charles?
Yeah, they are. Well, the distance is 30 metres, which is a good bit more than the 21 metres that we require. And there's no sunlighting or daylighting issues. Concern has been mentioned about parking in the objection and extra traffic, but and most developments do generate those concerns. But historically, the site has had a dwelling on it, and there is permission for a replacement dwelling. So this development won't really add to that. So based upon all that, the recommendation is for approval.
Right, anybody got anything to say on this one, or ask Charles? Bill, is that seconded? Recommendation's been moved, is that seconded? Okay, thank you. All those in favour of the recommendation of granting, please show.
9 in favour, Chair. So
Anybody against? No, that's carried. Right, so we go on to our topic report now. Charles, do you want to take us through this briefly? I've got a meeting at 4.
It is brief because it's an information-only item.
Ah, that's all right then.
So there's no decision to make on it. It's simply that there were complaints made over a weekend from members of the public to local councillors. They contacted the planning department, I think on the Monday, and in response to that, a tree preservation order was served. And it's the land. I don't know. Chair, you will recall it's.
I remember it very well, Charles.
Old Rampside Road, of course.
I remember it very well.
And you have the railway bridge, and it's basically the old mineral railway line, which is lined with trees. So they are now subject to a preservation order. Since serving the order, the planning manager has met the owner. Everyone is aware now that a tree preservation order has been served, and the consent of the council would be needed to fell trees in the future. Thank you, Chair.